What if I told you that Aston Martin's abandonment in Australia was not a simple engine problem, but the first big warning sign of the new 2026 regulations? Because when a team decides not to race for fear of destroying its own power unit, the story stops being sporting and becomes structural. After the Bahrain tests, with just 329 laps completed and multiple failures due to vibrations that damaged the hybrid system, the FIA was forced to intervene quietly. The question is clear: are we facing a specific failure, or the first real crack of the new hybrid era? From the first day in Sakir, the AMR26 Honda began to show worrying symptoms. We are not talking about lack of rhythm, nor setup adjustments, nor simple adaptation to the new regulations. We are talking about a car that could not complete basic running-in programs. While other teams were accumulating data, race simulations, and aerodynamic correlations, Aston Martin was struggling simply to stay on track. The balance was devastating. Just 329 laps in total during the tests, after an extremely limited previous shakedown in Barcelona of about 65 laps. And the last day was practically non-existent, only 6 laps before the day was aborted. The technical diagnosis began to leak quickly. Abnormal vibrations in the V6. Not normal developmental vibrations, but out-of-range oscillations that directly affected the hybrid system. The problem was not just mechanical, it was systemic. These vibrations ended up damaging the battery system and the ERS, forcing the car to stop to avoid a major failure. In other words, every time they pushed the engine into its true performance window, the risk of breaking something critical increased exponentially. The MGU-K was not recovering energy stably. The power unit was forced to derate on a straight line, deliberately reducing power to protect components. That explained the obvious loss of top speed compared to other manufacturers. But the problem went beyond pure performance. Several units had been broken. Honda's parts bank was beginning to run low even before the season began. And in a regulation where component management is key, this situation is alarming. Internally, the team understood the gravity. They didn't have enough mileage to validate the correlation between the chassis and the Honda architecture. They didn't fully understand how the car interacted with the new RA626H unit. Refrigeration seemed to be compromised. Energy integration was not stable. And every outing on the court meant playing with fire. Therefore, when Australia arrived, the threat was not just to be left out of the points. It was breaking another unit and being left with no room to react for the following races. It was seriously considered not to race in Melbourne or to retire after a few laps if the parameters got out of control again. Not by strategy. For technical survival. And this is where the case stops being just Aston Martin. Because the new 2026 regulation puts enormous weight on electrical management and hybrid stability. If one of the manufacturers suffers structural vibrations that affect the battery and ERS, the FIA cannot look the other way. Although there is no formal investigation or sanction publicly announced, technical monitoring is inevitable. The organization knows that the image of the new era depends on the reliability and credibility of the system. The abandonment in Australia was the visible consequence. But the real problem had brewed in Bahrain. A project that was to begin a new historical stage began with shooting limitations, lack of parts, vibrational failures, and unstable energy integration. The problem was no longer just technical. In Act 1 we understood what went wrong. Vibrations in the V6, damage to the hybrid system, shortage of parts, and ridiculous mileage in Bahrain. But now the story escalates. Because when a manufacturer begins the new era with a structural weakness, the consequences are not limited to abandonment. They become a domino effect. Aston Martin not only lost filming, lost information. And in modern Formula One, information is power. While the other teams were accumulating data on energy degradation, electrical deployment maps, and aerodynamic correlation with actual fuel load, AMR26 was entering and exiting the box. Each aborted run meant less understanding of the car's behavior under race conditions. This compromises immediate development, but also medium-term development. Regulation 2026 drastically increases dependence on the electrical component. Efficiency in energy recovery and deployment is not an add-on, it is the central axis of performance. If the MGU-K cannot recover to full capacity, if the system needs to reduce power to protect battery and electronics, the car is not only less competitive, it is strategically vulnerable. He cannot defend himself in a straight line. Can't attack. You cannot execute aggressive energy management plans. And here the second level of gravity appears: architecture. If the vibrations are not a simple calibration problem, but a consequence of the internal design of the engine hybrid assembly, the solution is not immediate. We are not talking about strengthening support or modifying software. We are talking about redesigning structural elements. And that in the middle of the season with budget limits and strict technical approvals is a nightmare. That's why the FIA watches. Although there is no official explosive statement, the organization cannot allow one of the new era manufacturers to start with critical reliability. The new regulatory cycle had to project stability, sustainability, and technological efficiency. If the public narrative begins with engines breaking due to vibrations and teams considering not racing, the credibility of the project suffers. In addition, there is a silent political component. When a manufacturer suffers so much in energy integration, suspicion inevitably arises as to whether others could be facing similar but not yet visible problems. The FIA must ensure that there are no extreme interpretations of the regulations in terms of vibrational management, energy recovery, or hybrid architecture that generate structural inequalities. Abandonment in Australia was the symptom, but the real fear is the precedent. Because if Honda needs to limit power to protect the system, Aston Martin cannot squeeze the chassis. You cannot correctly evaluate its aerodynamics in real conditions. He can't understand his balance in long runs. That means that even when they fix part of the mechanical problem, the development delay will already be in place. And meanwhile, the rest of the grille does not wait. Every run without full mileage widens the gap. Each broken unit reduces the strategic margin. Every conservative decision for fear of breaking compromises points in the championship. The internal pressure increases. External pressure too. And the most disturbing thing is not what has already happened. This is what can happen if the problem does not have a quick solution. If the vibration problem is structural, Honda will have to make extensive modifications. This implies internal redesign, bench validations, technical reapprovals, and a race against time to not consume more units than allowed. And in a regulation where the electrical part has a much greater weight than in previous cycles, any delay in optimizing hybrid integration is devastating. But there is something even more delicate. Trust that a driver who knows that the engine can go into protection mode in the middle of a straight line does not attack in the same way. An engineer who fears that each long run could destroy a battery does not plan the same way. A team that arrives at a Grand Prix considering not racing does not compete the same. Formula One is precision, but it is also conviction. And when the technical base falters, the entire structure suffers. Meanwhile, the FIA maintains its public stance of calm. There is no formal investigation announced. There is no sanction. There is no alarmist statement. But the implicit message has already been sent. The new era must be stable. And if any manufacturer compromises the image or the technical balance of the regulation, the agency will intervene if necessary. Because here is the true dimension of the matter. If Aston Martin manages to solve the problem quickly, this story will be remembered as a turbulent start. But if vibrations continue to affect performance, if the ERS continues to be vulnerable, if the parts bank does not recover, then the entire project can be mortgaged from the first race. And that changes the competitive map. A team that aspired to position itself as a reference for the new era could be forced to compete in survival mode for months. Not developing to win, but developing to simply finish races. And in a new regulatory cycle, the first year defines the evolutionary basis for the following ones. The bomb dropped by the FIA is not a noisy headline. It is a silent reminder. Reliability is part of the DNA of the 2026 regulation. And any structural crack at this initial point can have profound consequences. The abandonment in Australia was only the first visible chapter. The real story is being written now, in the test beds, in the technical meetings, in every decision about whether to risk or hold. Because when a new era begins showing a fissure, the question is no longer whether there will be an impact. What happened in Bahrain was not just a complicated test. It was the first sign that the new era 2026 does not forgive errors of concept. Abnormal vibrations in the V6, damage to the hybrid system, limited power units, and abandonment in Australia that did not occur due to lack of rhythm, but due to fear of breaking down. That nuance changes everything. Aston Martin didn't lose just one race. Lost mileage, lost data, lost strategic margin. And in a season where energy management is at the heart of performance, starting with an unstable hybrid system is starting uphill from day one. While others develop to earn tenths, they must develop to survive. The FIA, although without explosive headlines or public sanctions, has already made the implicit message clear. Reliability is an essential part of the regulations. The new era must project technological stability. You cannot start with a manufacturer on the verge of technical collapse. And when the agency looks closely, It is because it understands that what is at stake is not just the performance of a team, but the credibility of the entire regulation. The big question now is whether this problem is temporary or structural. If it is a question of adjustments and reinforcements, or if the architecture of the project itself needs a deep review. Because if the defect is in the concept, the season can be conditioned from its foundation. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.